2. Welcome back. WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. I get to say something I've never been able to say in, let's see, we've had NST since 1998. I've been doing this since 91. The team's been here since 96. So let's call it 24 seasons. Luke Jones, the number 1 seed with a bullet in December, the Baltimore Ravens. How about that, right? You live long enough, you see almost everything, right?
Right, and they only need to win 5 more games to host their first AFC championship in Baltimore. First one in Baltimore since January 1971. So it's that easy. They just have to win 5 more games.
Just 5 more. That's all, right? I mean, if the Orioles won 5 more, they would have won the World Series a few years ago. They've made it look so easy, right? And then you see what the Patriots went through on Sunday night, and you see that it took a 49.5-yard field goal by Justin Tucker for the Ravens to sort of escape against a 10-1 team on a day when things weren't all that great with the defense, and the quarterback did fumble the ball after a long drive, which, first fumble of the year, it's incredible, but you know that that's not going to happen in the game where you're up 49-16. It's going to happen in the game where it's 17-17. And this is why I write books about this stuff, right? Like this, from the big trust to Tucker to game balls to the Marcus Peters looking like he's going to the Hall of Fame one week and didn't look so good this week. It's been quite a story, right? Like if we're just weaving the narrative of how all this came together, boy, Purple Rain 3 and the Purple Revolution of John Harbaugh, right?
No question about it. And, the difference on Sunday, and we talked about this in one of our other conversations, was the expectations have just been so high, they actually looked mortal on Sunday. Now, when you say that, they still beat the best team in the NFC. They beat a team that had been a field goal away from being undefeated going into Sunday's game. So, no, it's no accomplishment to scoff at or to diminish. It's just they had played at such an incredibly high level for multiple weeks, going back to the Seattle game before the bye week. So we knew at some point there was going to be, not regression, but just you're not going to just play your absolute best football.
We knew there was going to be a close game.
Yeah.
At some point, they're going to be in one of these games. And quite frankly, we've lived most of our lives as fans 3 out of every 4 weeks, it's kind of like that, right? Like, it might not always be tied, right? But 3 out of 4 weeks in the history of being a Ravens fan, because they've been such a competitive team, we haven't blown a lot of teams out because we haven't had that kind of offense. And most weeks it looks like this, and it's been a little while, right? Like, how long ago does that Cleveland ass-beating feel at this point, right?
Well, it was a little over 2 months ago. That's literally how long it's been, and how about on Sunday? I don't know if we even touched on this. When San Francisco drove down the field and scored a touchdown, that was the first time the Ravens had even trailed in a football game since the second quarter of the Seattle game.
October 20th, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about 1 touchdown drive. We're talking about being down 7 points. They hadn't even done that in 6 or 7 weeks. So it really does speak to what kind of incredible role they've been on. And, yeah, they didn't blow out San Francisco on Sunday, but they still took care of business. They still took everything the 49ers gave them, and they handled it. I said it right after the game, the fact that the Ravens, they scored a season-low 20 points. They gave up all the yards on the ground that they did, and yet they still won. That says a lot about them. I think it says a lot about the 49ers as a very worthy adversary. And if the Ravens and the 49ers meet 2 months from now in Super Bowl 54, then great. I think many people would enjoy that kind of rematch.
You're making the hair on the back of my neck stand up, Luke. How dare you do that, man? Talking dirty like that. Hey, look, I have purposely not talked about this garbage, right? Like, we've never had a year where I'm beating the drum Thanksgiving weekend or the drumstick to think that we're going to be in the Super Bowl, right? Like, but I look at what happens with the Vegas odds, right? I look at where they are on power rankings. I look at them escaping on a rainy day against a 10-1 team with a 49-yard field goal. Like, all parts of this have you thinking, like, do you have a flight for Miami booked, right? Like, that we need to get on that. If you don't, and people are asking me, are you doing bus trips here or there? And then New England goes and takes away the possibility of a bus trip up there until such point where the Ravens lose a football game. And I don't think this is going to be easy going to Buffalo this week. I know the Jets look like a lion one week and a lamb the next, and you get them 4 days later. Who knows? What happens? It's cold and flu season. I don't know what to say, but as I sit here, I have never sat on the radio in early December and talked about the Baltimore Ravens being the best team in football. Like, I don't even know how to act. Like, I mean, literally, I said that to Jamison Hensley and Jeff Zrebeck last Monday night in L.A. I'm like, how do you act when they're winning 38-6 in your 3,000 miles from home and you've been doing this 25 years and you've literally never seen anything like it? Like, and that being said, they're going to find different ways to win or lose over the next 4 or 5 or 6 weeks. That's going to write their script. This was just one of those, they didn't have this one in their golf bag. Now they do, right?
Sure. I mean, they took care of business. I think we've talked about the value to having this kind of a football game where you still win, even though you didn't play your absolute best football. And I think it was a good reminder for some of the younger guys on this team that just in case you had forgotten, it's really hard to win in the NFL. As much as we made it look really easy over the last 5-6 weeks, it's not that easy.
Ask the Browns.
Sure. So I think I thought there was some value beyond just getting the win, beyond scoreboard watching and then seeing New England fall to Houston on Sunday night to put them in the number 1 seed spot. For now, they still have to win football games. There's still, let's put this in proper perspective, there's still a quarter of the regular season to go here. So as much as people are thinking about January, we know they're going to be in the playoffs. There's no, they are as close to clinching, at the very least, a playoff spot as you can get without having officially clinched. We know they're going to be the division champion. So it really comes down to taking care of business over these last 4 games.
But this is the point where I say Aladar would have won the Triple Crown if it would have ended at the quarter pole.
Right. But hey, they're in great position. They are in a spot that they've frankly never been in. I think you look back to 2006, they were chasing the Chargers were the number 1 seed that year. So I mean that was as close as this the Ravens have come to kind of being where they are right now. But even that 2006 team, that was much more of a dominant defensive, traditional kind of Ravens team, and an offense that was pretty good, but not anything special. But this team, the way that they've profiled, I mean, the offense is incredible, and the defense, run defense notwithstanding on Sunday, and again, I think that's something that has been hidden a little bit as far as not as big of a strength as some people have tried to make it out to be, because you look at the rushing yards given up per game. But this is still a football team that has a great offense and a defense that has gotten much, much, much better since the start of the season. And, hey, last time I checked, those are the 2 most important phases. And then you throw in special teams and, oh, yeah, you still have Justin Tucker, the best kicker in the game, and Sam Cook, who's one of the best punters in the game, and that's a formula that's going to win you a hell of a lot of football games, and that's why the Ravens are 10-2 for the first time in franchise history, and going into the rest of December with a chance to have home field advantage throughout. And I've talked about this for a while now. We started bringing this up probably about a month ago, but go back and look at the most recent Super Bowl entries. You have to go back to the 2012 Ravens to find a Super Bowl entry that did not have a first-round bye. So it just shows you how important it is. It shows you how difficult, not impossible, because the Ravens have done it twice, but how difficult it is to have to play in the wild card round and then go on the road. That's not easy. So if you can eliminate that first step and have a chance to sit back and watch other teams duke it out and get some rest in the process and then host a divisional round game, boy, you'll take that, and the Ravens have put themselves in great position to be able to do that. And, again, if they keep winning, they control, I don't want to say control your own destiny, because that's such a weird statement when you really think about it, but they control their path to the number 1 seed, and it's a spot they've never been in, and that's a heck of a lot of fun.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. I am Nasty at WNST.net. I have wild adventures this week. Luke will be on the backfields in Owings Mills. We'll be doing a lot of Baltimore positive storytelling here this week, as well as some Lamar Jackson storytelling, because Lord knows there's been enough of that over the last 5 or 6 weeks, and we'll get back up on that before the holidays when I return next week for the Jets game. But I want to talk about the secondary, Luke, because this was always your thing, right? And I think I could go back and Google 2015 and 16 and 17 writings of where was the secondary going to come from if it wasn't at that time Jimmy Smith, right? Or if it wasn't literally the secondary market, which was various points of Michael Huff. And who's the guy they brought in that went to the Bills and played? The other
Corey Graham.
Not Corey Graham. There was another safety that went to Denver, maybe. Hold on.
Darian Stewart.
Darian Stewart. I mean, there were all of these guys that sort of shuffled in. Weddle sort of lived, and they gave Jefferson money after they failed in drafting kids from Florida that didn't work out. And I hear all of that, but in the success of this team right now, when you talk about the run stop being a problem, dude, no matter, even if you're really a good passing team and you're really an okay running team, isn't your gig going to be to try to run the football against this team just because the secondary is daunting, even when they're dinged up, even when Jimmy Smith isn't having his best day, even when Marcus Peters can be had and doesn't look up for the ball and can't find the ball on a rainy day? All that being said, if you're Team X approaching the best team in the NFL, right, that has this crazy quarterback that when you give him the ball, you don't get it back, as San Francisco found out on Sunday, right? That I would try to run against them just because the secondary, when I look out there, I don't have mismatches there. And if you can run the ball against the Ravens, that's how you get into a 17-17 game that is a fumble away or an interception away or a muff punt away, whatever it is. San Francisco could have stole the game. I don't think they were the better team, and I think the weather – I heard somebody say, like on one of the national broadcasts Sunday, maybe it's Dungy or I don't even know who it was, said that the weather benefited the 49ers. I don't really, believe that in the end that it helped them that much, but I do believe it benefits the lesser team, and I think they were the lesser team on Sunday. All that, in a nutshell, run the ball against the Ravens. They better learn how to stop it because that's pretty much what everybody's going to want to do, I think.
Yeah, I think the issue is not every team with that kind of, to have that mindset, you have to have a really good defense on your side, and most teams don't have a defense like the 49ers. I mean, if you're going to try to run the football against the Ravens, but if you can't stop them, you're going to be down 14 points really quick, and then you're going to be throwing the football. I mean, that's part of the beauty of the formula that they have working for them right now.
When it works, especially early in a game when it works. It's how they bury teams. I would agree with that. Yeah.
But I want to be clear about this. When I said that I've thought their run defense has been overrated, that's not to say that it's terrible or that it's the bottom 5 in the league or anything like that.
But it hasn't been tested because they're up 30 points at halftime.
Sure. But when you look at the yards per carry allowed, that it didn't look as good as the rushing yards per game. I think we all, as we get more sophisticated in looking at baseball over the last 15 or 20 years, I think it's time to be a little more sophisticated in looking at certain football statistics. And, we look at yards per game. We look at volume there. I mean, that's one reason why people still try to, some, not many, but some people still try to diminish Lamar Jackson because they say, well, he's only throwing for, 180 yards per game or 190 yards per game. But when you look at the efficiency, that's what the key is. That's what's made him and this Ravens offense so good. But on the flip side, looking at the defense, going into Week 13, they ranked 4th in rushing yards allowed per game. Yards per carry was a little more middle of the pack. But it hasn't hurt them because they jump out in front of teams, and teams can just forget about running the football then. I mean, it's just the truth is, to score points in this league, unless you have a historic kind of running game like the Ravens have right now, you have to throw the football. You're going to score more points throwing the football than running the football unless you have a running game that's so unique like the Ravens have. And I'll remind everyone, and I think this is what's kind of interesting looking at it from the flip side, we've spent so much time kind of talking about how do you stop the Ravens? How do you slow down this Ravens offense? How do you give yourself a chance to win? And you just said it in terms of if you have a defense that can get some stops, yeah, you try to run the football a little more, try to control the clock. At least not allow the Ravens to control the clock, let's say.
Well, I'm just saying that's a better game plan than thinking you're going to go in and throw at Earl Thomas and throw at Marlon Humphrey. And, I mean, especially on a wintry day, right? Like, stopping the run, the day they don't stop the run well is the day they're going to lose. The day they don't stop the run well and kick the ball around a little, that's the day they get eliminated. Until then, we're having a parade, right? Like, literally, that's the formula to beat them. The formula to beat them isn't to come in and throw for 426 yards and Matt Ryan it all around. And that's not the way they're going to get beat. That's not the way Tom Brady could beat them. That's not going to be the way Patrick Mahomes can come in here and beat them on the third week of January. And quite frankly, that's what we should be talking about, right? We should be talking about who is going to beat them in January in Baltimore. Or how are they going to – I mean, you're talking 5 wins to the championship game.
Yeah.
We know who these teams are. How are the Cleveland Browns going to beat them a couple days before Christmas and wreck my whole tour of the Christmas Story house and the leg lamp? How are the Pittsburgh Steelers, who seem to, always be a pain in the ass, going to come in here and sour up my eggnog and put us on a bus to New England? You know what I mean? Like, these are the conversations.
Not going to, by the way.
But that's not going to happen because the ball's going over Marlon Humphrey's head, right? And I don't think anybody believes that. Maybe Baker Mayfield believes that, and maybe that's the way they wreck our Christmas. I don't know, but I start to pinch me. I feel like I'm on a purple cloud because we sit here and we talk about them zigging and zagging as though they're impervious because they haven't lost in 2 months. I'm trying to think this thing through and say, how are we going to get our feelings hurt and get eliminated? Because most teams lose. There's only one team that's going to win. They're now the team that's number one. We've never had to think about it this way, Luke, ever, right? So thinking about it in the paranoid sense, it's what's the formula to beat the Baltimore Ravens? And we used to wonder what was the formula to beat the Patriots, right? It's kick Brady in the teeth, get him off his spot, get the ball up in the air, grab the ball out of the air, pop the ball from a running back, but they take the air out of the footballs up there, so you could never do that. You certainly didn't have any control of their schedule, right? You never had a control over whether they were going to be 14-2. You knew you had to go to Cincinnati and Pittsburgh and whatever, right? So now, with 4 weeks out and seeing Buffalo, Jets on short rest, lousy Cleveland, Pittsburgh playing a third-string quarterback, we're all just tooting our purple horn and hanging the lights in here, right? I've got my lava lamp flowing. It's not flowing just yet. It's a little cool this morning, Luke. But you know what I'm saying? Like, we're talking about a parade here in real terms for the first time ever at this level, and we just saw them get run a little bit on. And I think everybody else has seen them get run on a little bit. And I would say that that's what I would do if I were trying to beat them, because I think throwing the ball over their heads is not going to work. That's not the way you're going to beat this team.
I think one team in the AFC, I think Kansas City can do that because they've done it before against them.
Okay.
Look, that's not to say that Kansas City doesn't run the ball at all in that scenario, but to me, if you're asking me who I feel the biggest threat to the Ravens are in the AFC, if we're talking about getting into the postseason, and look, I know people right now are listening and saying, one game at a time. First of all, we can look ahead because we don't play. But
it's what we do.
I mean, we'll talk about Buffalo this week, but if the Ravens play their best game or close to it and Buffalo plays their typical game, although I certainly will give them their props for how they played against Dallas on Thanksgiving, although the Cowboys are a mess right now, the Ravens should win. And it shouldn't necessarily be a game that comes down to the final second necessarily, but it's on the road. It's Buffalo. The Bills have more to play for now after this New England loss because they're thinking about the division.
Sure.
As far as being a possibility at least, even if it's not a likelihood. But they're one game out now. So they're going to have plenty to play for. But when you're sizing this thing up in the big picture, Kansas City is the one team that I point to and say they can hang with the Ravens offense because that's what kind of offense they have. And Patrick Mahomes, who is further removed from the knee issue, coming back from that. And
the good news is they'll be here having crab cakes, bringing the barbecue, if it comes down to that. Like, we sit in that position. They got 4 losses. We got 2. That game better not be in Kansas City, right? Literally.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it is, then
shame on the Ravens.
Something's gone terribly wrong for the Ravens. If you're talking about having lost 2 games, now Kansas City does have the head-to-head tiebreaker. But I'm talking more in terms of just general matchup in the AFC. What's the matchup that would concern me the most? It'd be Kansas City. It's not to say that I'd pick the Ravens to lose in Baltimore against them, but they're the team that, as much as you talk about trying to take the air out of the ball, and I hear you on that, and San Francisco did a nice job with that in the way that they ran the ball, at the end of the day, you have to be able to score enough points. I mean, the 49ers, like I said, they held the Ravens to a season low, 20 points. That's the lowest point total the Ravens had all year. But they didn't score enough. So that's what you run into. That's the challenge in facing this team right now. The 49ers got some stops, but do you have an offense explosive enough? Now, I just mentioned Kansas City. Do I think Kansas City is going to hold the Ravens to 20 points? No, I don't, but I think Kansas City has the firepower to score 40, potentially, if the elements are cooperative, and certainly in mid-January when we'd be talking about a potential matchup. That's a big question, and I think less flattering weather conditions would certainly favor the Ravens there. But yeah, the fact that we're talking about potential January matchups in the beginning of December, that's a place the Ravens really haven't been before.
It's a fun new place.
Yeah, I mean, again, and I don't know, maybe I just liked the 2006 team way more than you did, but that team was kind of in a very similar spot at this point.
Oh man, I was going nuts with that team, bro.
Yeah,
I mean, come on. I mean, I don't think about that team so much because we won in 13.
They lost. Right? They lost.
Because we won in 13. I would, had Joe Flacco never come along and had that been our, like an Oriole fan will look back on the Buck era and whatever and have the lost moments and never having a parade, right? Because we had a parade here. I mean, Billick didn't have another parade, but he had one. I see all of these things. Hey, dude, as an aside, I'm going to Tokyo this week and I'm going to Seoul. I'm not hiding on plain sight on the internet from traveling the world with my wife and some dear friends. But I look back at videos from 2007. I was trapped in Tokyo in a hotel room watching the Ravens play this big game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you mentioned the 06 team, dude. That was the 07 team where it was the year after. It was the year McNair was no good. It was the game they were losing 28-0 in the first quarter in the rain on Monday Night Football. It was right at the point where Brian was losing his job. All of this awful stuff happened at that point. And I go back and I look at that era of players and where the level of fervor, for the Ravens was. And I see what they're trying to build here with Lamar, and this is the best team they've ever had, right? I mean, like, there's no doubt about that, and it's quietly snuck up on us, and then we're in that pinch me mode, but they better not go to Buffalo and lose, right? Like, now they have to win in Buffalo. They have to go on the road and beat a 9-3 team, maybe in the snow. Who knows wherever the weather's going to be, right? But that's where the level of expectation is. And I think that the 2007 Ravens had some of that off of 6 in a way that, John dealt with that, and I think Joe dealt with that in the aftermath of winning Super Bowls around here because they were in the playoffs every year. They won on the road every year. We loaded up the bus every year. We got the purple flamingos and the purple lights out and all that. I don't know. This would be a week and this would be a month that driving around the community, are the flags coming back out? Are the purple flamingos coming out? Are the tent sales happening? I don't know. There were still empty seats on Sunday. The weather was awful, but a lot of people didn't come. I mean, thousands of people didn't come to the game on Sunday. I want to see that level for the community to come together again, in the aftermath of the knee and London and all of people who aren't coming downtown for whatever reason, the weather. It's certainly not because of Lamar Jackson. It's certainly not because the team's not interesting or the team's not fun or the team hasn't stood by the community the right way or they're not doing appropriate military flyovers or, I don't know what your excuse could be when tickets are $25 other than it's raining and it's cold, and that's a great excuse because I sat in it on Sunday. But the level of expectation right now is they're not going to lose again, right? Like the way we're talking about a home game means they're not going to lose a game. And if they're not going to lose a game, that means they're going to play, I don't know, who are they going to play? Pittsburgh? Who would they get first, right? Kansas City would probably win and go to New England, right? Unless unless Buffalo win, there's a lot of things that could happen here, but they're going to have to win 2 big games, one at home, one on the road, whether they lose another one or not. But we're just acting as though, like, they have 7 wins in them right now, like 7 in a row, 15 in a row. Maybe they do. Maybe they do, and I hope they do, and I'm optimistic, but I'm also realistic that, like, winning 15 games in a row in the National Football League, that would be a hell of a parade, and I hope to be around to see it 8 weeks from now,
Sure, and that's a reminder that there's still a long way to go here. I mean, Buffalo is not going to be an automatic layup. You need to go there and play well. If the Ravens go there and play well,
they might be good, dude. They're 9-3. I watched them play on Thanksgiving. They might be good.
And this is where I'll take my medicine a little bit, because I think a week or two ago I said they were maybe the worst 8-3 team I've ever seen. Hey, they went into Dallas, and look, the Cowboys are a mess. Jason Garrett's going to get canned.
Dude, I think you pooped on them a couple times over the last month.
Yeah, well,
I think you have.
Yeah, but if you look at a lot of the metrics and look at their strength of schedule and barely beaten mediocre and bad teams, there was reason to be skeptical about that. That wasn't me hating on them. It was, okay, you beat Miami. Congratulations.
By the way, though, at the end of the year, you look back and see, like, the Eagles as a team that's not very good. Some of these teams, the Browns, they lost to them. A team that's not very good. So they lost to some teams that aren't very good. Hey, the Ravens lost to the Browns too. So, right, like, I don't know how you view these. I mean, they lost to the Patriots by 6 points 2 months ago. They get them again a couple days before Christmas. Yeah. That's going to be a fun game. I'm going to sit and watch that one in Cleveland. I'll be sitting in my hotel room in Cleveland watching that, and that will have a bearing on the Ravens. One of the fun parts of this, Luke, that goes without saying, was just sitting around on Sunday night and hating on Tom Brady and having a real stake in the game. And waking up on Monday morning and feeling like, hey, we're one up on the Patriots. We've never, ever, 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 ever woken up on a December morning and eyeballs above Tom Brady, ever. And that's, so it gets me back to where I was with McNair in Tokyo in 2007 and expectations. And, that team never bore it out. Todd Heap never got a ring, right? I mean, some of those guys never won, right?
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wrote about this late last week at WNST.net, that I think one of the challenges for this team now, and maybe it's not, maybe challenge isn't the right word, but I think just as far as the mindset is to maintain the proper urgency. They're the number 1 seed now, and that helps because as much as New England is looking mortal, Tom Brady looking very mortal at age 42, that offense is not impressive, period, and it hasn't been all year, really. The defense, I think, is really darn good, but maybe hasn't been quite as dynamic as it had been earlier in the season, although they played really, really amazing defense against everyone other than the Ravens and I guess Houston now. But I think it's important for this team to maintain its edge. It's one reason I loved what Earl Thomas said last week, where he was asked about the Ravens and 49ers being a Super Bowl preview, and he said, you think the 49ers are going to be in the Super Bowl? And he actually didn't say it in a disparaging way, but it was just matter of fact, where he said, well, whoever we play in the Super Bowl is going to be in trouble. And that's the kind of talk that John Harbaugh bristles at, but that was the kind of talk that the Brian Billick era, you expected to hear that from players. And I think because of what you just said, talking about 2006 to 2007, there was a sentiment with the Ravens, even go back 5-6 weeks ago. What were we saying about this team? Or what was the consensus opinion about this team? Okay, they'll probably make the playoffs, but they're probably another year away from winning a Super Bowl. Because we all talk about the proverbial window being open. But you can find so many examples, whether it's talking about the Rams last week, the Jaguars from a couple years ago who were beating the Patriots in the AFC Championship game. You always think you have this window. You think you have this time period where you're going to have great opportunities to win championships. And what happens? Your quarterback gets hurt, or your offensive coordinator gets hired away and you don't have the same mojo with your offense, or you lose your defensive. I'm just speaking in general terms. You have some bad luck. You have a schedule that really works out to be pretty brutal. And before you know it, your window closes shut. Now,
Well, as Billick said before they went out, in Super Bowl 35, this is it. This is the last time we're all going to be together. I mean,
Right.
we're loving some Greg Roman offense right now. You know who else is loving them some Greg Roman? 5 NFL owners right now, right?
Potentially, sure.
So this... It is fleeting, and Lamar Jackson's youth and vitality is fleeting, and having the best kicker on the planet is fleeting. All of this is fleeting, right? I mean, as fleeting as Steve McNair's greatness was in 2006, right?
Sure. I mean, it can, when you capture that, and I don't want to say it's lightning in a bottle because that's implying that it's fluky. I think the Ravens are a very, very, very good, great football team.
And they only need to be great for 8 more weeks.
Yeah, a 10-2 record suggests that, but that's where you can't get too caught up in thinking about big picture or getting ahead of yourself. You have to take every single game for what it is and that opportunity to get better. And from a big picture standpoint, yeah. And I know people have already written about the possibility that John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson could be the next Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. But guess what? History would suggest that's probably not going to be the case. In fact, very likely won't be the case because we haven't seen anything else like that in the Super Bowl era. So my point is you have an opportunity at 10-2. You're the number 1 seed right now. You control your path to home field advantage. You have an opportunity to host the first AFC championship game in Baltimore since January 1971. Take advantage of all those things because you don't know what's going to happen whenever this season comes to an end, whether it's in January in a playoff loss or whether it's raising another Lombardi on February 2nd, because you can ask Earl Thomas. He won a Super Bowl, then lost getting back there the next time, and they in Seattle have had a franchise quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And guess what? They haven't been back to an NFC championship game since then. Ask Marshall Yanda, who won a Super Bowl with Joe Flacco in New Orleans 6-7 years ago. He assumed he probably would have a chance to win another one with a quarterback who was only 5 years into this thing. And the Ravens then only won one more playoff game after that until Lamar Jackson came around and they rebooted things. So you always think that you have this window in this time period where a team could be really good or great for an extended period of time, and something can change there, whether it's coaches moving on or a couple ill-timed injuries, whatever it might be.
Well, you mentioned Yanda, man. Yanda's an incredible guy, right? Because he was around for 6. He was around for all of the Palomalu pick. He was around when Ed Reed was dancing around with the football. He was around when Billy Cundiff missed the kick. He was on the field when Billy Cundiff missed the kick. He was around to celebrate a win, and he was there when the defense couldn't hold a 2-touchdown lead in New England when they probably should have won another. Could have gone back. I mean, he could have easily been in 3-4 Super Bowls. He's been in 1, and he damn near lost that one, where they were down on the 1-yard line. But, right? So Yanda's an incredible story of all of that. If you were to sit and talk to him about how hard this is to do and how 10-2 is, about as worthless as winning a college game in October, right? Like, it's just a game, Yeah,
well, I mean, 10-2 is valuable because that's how you're the number 1 seed at this point in time, which, keep in mind, they're holding the number 1 seed. They don't have it yet. I mean, that's still a long way to go in that regard. But yeah, he'd be and talking to him after Sunday's game, I mean, he's excited. I mean, Marshall Yanda said that this is a special team. I don't think anyone can dispute that at this point in time. The kind of role that they've been on since the end of September. But there's a long way to go, and there are a lot of pitfalls potentially between now and getting to Miami. So it really is a case of how does this team maintain its edge? How do they continue to stay focused and compartmentalizing on what each week's challenge brings, and to not slip up? I mean, it's that simple. I mean, it's as much as you can try to look at it in the big picture sense and say, wow, they have to win 6 more games to get to the Super Bowl. They can't lose any games here. At least at this point, you can't be thinking about losing any games here to maintain home field advantage, although I'm not convinced that New England drops another game between now and the end of the season. So maybe you have a little tiny margin for error, but you can't treat it that way. And again, you can't take any of this for granted, and I think that's where you will lean on your veterans a little bit more. And not that I think any of these young guys will necessarily do that, but you are talking about guys who are 22, 23, 24 years old. And that's why I thought Sunday was so important for them to not only get a win, but it was a little bit of a reminder that, hey, not going to beat teams by 4 or 5 touchdowns every week, despite how the last month had looked in that regard. So I go back to what Brian Billick said after the Ravens clinched in 2000. I mean, the time is here. It's time to go to a Super Bowl. I mean, there's no sense hiding from that from an expectation standpoint when you're talking about a team that is the best in the NFL. They're going to be number one in all the power rankings. They're the number one seed in the AFC.
They're a terrible value in Vegas to win the Super Bowl right now.
At this point,
there's no value.
Yeah, I mean, they were a great value in September, but
somebody's holding
now.
a $100 ticket out there and saying, man, I'm going to pay for my ticket to the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Luke, let's grab us a break, man. We got a lot of things going on around here this week. I'm going to be in Tokyo and in Seoul and on social media. You're going to find me on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm going to be doing radio from there. I'm going to be doing video from there. I'm going to be talking from there about cities and Baltimore Positive. We got incredible Baltimore Positive stuff for the holidays that Don Moeller and I have done, including episode 100. Big thanks to all of our sponsors, including Fadley's and Jennings and our dear, dear friends over at State Fair for hosting us up. We're going to be back at Fadley's next week with Police Commissioner Harrison. I'm working on the crime plan here, the crime reduction and departmental transformation plan. So, hey, Baltimore first, Ravens first place. It's good times around here. Plenty ahead. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore sports.